Chapter 1. The Day is Now. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I want you to take a moment right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and just breathe. This moment, this breath you're taking, is your point of departure. It's the place where your story shifts, where possibility begins. If you're listening to this audiobook, The Day is Now, it tells me that somewhere inside you, there is a desire for change. Perhaps you feel stuck. Maybe you've been waiting. You might even be wondering if a different life is possible, or if the right moment will ever come. That's why you're here. You're here not by accident. You're here because deep down you know something. That change doesn't happen in a distant tomorrow. Change begins here, in this present moment, with you listening right now. Maybe life has felt confusing. Maybe you felt uncertain about your next step or weighed down by the pressure of all the decisions ahead. Maybe you've tried to make a change before and it didn't stick. Maybe you've been telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow. But that tomorrow, more often than not, becomes another day of hesitation, another day of waiting for something magical to happen. This audiobook exists to remind you that the most powerful moment you ever have and the most meaningful one is right now. Too often, we put our dreams on hold because we think we need more time, more strength, more clarity, or more certainty. But the truth is that none of those things are prerequisites for beginning. The only thing you really need to begin is the willingness to act in the present, and that willingness is something you already have, simply by listening. In the chapters that follow, we will explore why waiting has such a strong hold on us, not to judge you for it, but to understand it, to see it clearly so that you can move beyond it. We will talk about the mindset that supports change, the habits that anchor you to the present, and the ways in which tiny, intentional steps taken today can reshape your future in ways you may never have imagined. So let us step into this journey together. Not as a lecture, not as a set of rules, but as a conversation. This is a space created for reflection, for calm, and for clarity. This is a moment to step outside of the noise, the distraction, the endless swirl of thoughts that keep you waiting for a moment that feels right. The truth is that the feeling doesn't have to be perfect. The conditions don't have to be ideal. The time doesn't have to be more convenient. What matters most is this: your presence, right here, right now. As you listen, you may find yourself leaning in, or your mind may wander. Both are natural. If your thoughts drift to the past, gently bring them back to this moment. If they worry about the future, gently return them here, to the present. The day is now. This moment is now. And what we do with this moment, how we choose to meet it, can open a different kind of life experience, one anchored not in regret or anticipation, but in presence and possibility. In this chapter, we'll begin with the idea that waiting is a universal experience, something almost all of us grapple with at one point or another. And we'll gently begin to see waiting not as an obstacle to be conquered forcefully, but as an experience to understand so that we can walk through it with awareness and intention. I invite you to listen with an open mind and an open heart. As we speak about these ideas, know that this is not about perfection. This is not about having every answer. This is about exploration, about presence, and about beginning exactly where you are. This audiobook is not asking you to become someone else. It's asking you to become more fully you, starting in this moment, right now. We will move from understanding to application, from reflection to action. You'll hear insights that invite you to think a little differently, feel a little more deeply, and act with genuine intention. There will be moments that ask you to pause and consider how you've been living, and moments that encourage you to say, I can take one small step today. And because this audiobook acknowledges that lasting change doesn't happen in an instant, it will guide you gently, chapter by chapter, toward a deeper relationship with the present moment and with yourself. So, here, at the beginning, know this. If you've ever felt overlooked, by life, overlooked by opportunity, or just unsure about how to begin, you have already taken the first step. You showed up. You listened. You chose now. And that choice, this very breath, this very moment, is where change begins. Chapter 2. Why We Wait. We all know the feeling, that pause before we begin something important, that hesitation that somehow becomes habitual, that quiet voice inside whispering, "Not yet, later." But why do we wait? Why do we put off what we know is good for us, what we truly want to do, and what might transform our lives if we only started? The answer is both deeply human and surprisingly complex. At its core, waiting isn't usually a matter of laziness or poor discipline. It's often rooted in emotion and psychology more than in time management itself. Researchers have found that procrastination, the act of delaying tasks even when we know it's harmful, is not a simple flaw in character, but a coping mechanism our minds use to protect us from uncomfortable feelings about the task at hand. One of the most powerful internal barriers to action is fear. Not just the fear of failure, but also fear of judgment and fear of not being enough. When a task involves risk, even emotional risk, our brains register it as a potential threat. It's not laziness, it's instinct. When discomfort or anxiety arises, delaying the task offers temporary relief from those feelings. That relief feels good in the moment, and our brains reward us for it, even though it harms our long-term goals. This emotional avoidance becomes a cycle we fall into again and again. Closely linked to fear is self-doubt and perfectionism. Some of us hold ourselves to such high standards that we don't even begin unless we think we have the perfect idea or the perfect conditions. But perfectionism often becomes paralysis. We refuse to start until we feel ready, a feeling that rarely comes. We tell ourselves we need more time, more clarity, more confidence, or more resources. Meanwhile, life moves on. Another internal force is the way our brains prioritize immediate comfort over long-term benefit. Psychologists call this present bias, a tendency to prefer small, immediate rewards over larger future gains. When faced with a challenging task, our minds instinctively gravitate toward things that feel easier in the moment. Scrolling on our phones, binge-watching a show, or checking email again and again. These distractions trigger quick satisfaction, which our brain rewards with spikes of pleasure neurotransmitters, even though they have nothing to do with what we truly want to achieve. There's also what psychologists call self-handicapping, a surprisingly common behavior where we delay starting something important as a way to protect our self-worth. If we never begin, we can't fail. If we fail, we can blame lack of time rather than lack of ability. In this way, procrastination becomes a kind of self-defense mechanism, not because we are weak, but because our minds are trying to shield us from the blow to our confidence. External distractions also play a significant role. In today's world, our attention is continually pulled in different directions by notifications, entertainment, and constant stimulation. These distractions offer immediate gratification, and our brains quickly develop habit loops that reward us for avoiding effortful tasks. Before long, delaying becomes routine, a mental pattern that feels almost automatic. But waiting isn't without cost. Every time we delay meaningful action, we reinforce the belief that now is not the right time, and we miss opportunities to grow. What's worse, we often underestimate how much time and effort tasks truly require, something psychologists call the planning fallacy. We tell ourselves we have plenty of time and push action into the future, only to realize later that the future we imagined didn't arrive as we expected. And there's another layer: overwhelm and decision paralysis. When tasks feel too big or too vague, our minds simply shut down. It's not about laziness, it's about mental overload. When we don't know where to start or how to break down a task into manageable pieces, we put it off entirely, not because we don't care, but because our brain perceives it as too emotionally taxing to begin. These factors, fear, perfectionism, emotional avoidance, instant gratification, confusion, and overwhelm, weave together a powerful web that keeps us waiting. Understanding them doesn't solve everything, but it dissolves part of the mystery. When you know why you wait, you begin to see waiting not as a personal flaw, but a psychological pattern that can be acknowledged and gently transformed. In the next chapter, we will explore how understanding these barriers opens the door to real change, not through willpower alone, but through awareness, intention, and small steps taken today rather than later. But let this chapter be a mirror, a way to see that waiting isn't a sign of weakness, but a human experience rooted in emotion and survival instinct, one you can learn to navigate with grace and insight. Chapter 3. Recognizing your power right now. There is a powerful truth that many people overlook. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. Every story of transformation you've ever admired, whether in books, in life, or in history, began not at a moment of perfect clarity, but at the point where someone chose to start despite uncertainty. The idea that we must wait for ideal circumstances, a clear sign, or the perfect amount of motivation before taking the first step is one of the greatest myths that keeps people stuck. Motivation is not something that strikes like lightning and then carries you forward. Motivation is often the result of your first action, not the cause of it. When you act, even in the smallest way, something inside you shifts. Your brain doesn't wait for motivation to appear before moving. Instead, your action sparks motivation, and from that spark comes momentum that fuels the next step. Too many of us fall into the trap of thinking that we need to feel ready before we begin. We tell ourselves things like, "I'll start when I have more confidence," or "I'll begin when everything is perfectly aligned." But this mindset creates not liberation, but delay. Waiting for clarity or readiness becomes a way to avoid discomfort, uncertainty, and the possibility of imperfection. In reality, clarity is not something you discover before you begin. Clarity is something you create by acting. When you take that first step, your mind starts to form an understanding of what's ahead. You learn by doing, by trying, by experimenting, and by adjusting as you go. The power of small actions cannot be overstated. Think of change as a mountain built from grains of sand, layer upon layer of small behaviors stacked over time. A tiny step taken consistently becomes the foundation of something much larger, something real, something visible. Research and experience both show that micro-behaviors, small atomic actions, create momentum. These actions may seem insignificant at first, but they accumulate and compound into patterns, habits, and ultimately meaningful outcomes. You don't need to leap to the top of the mountain in one move. You need only place one foot in front of the other, again and again. Consider for a moment that every decision you make today, however small, is like a vote for the person you are becoming. When you choose to take action now, you send a message to your subconscious: I am capable, I am committed, I am someone who follows through. This is neither mystical nor vague, it's psychological reality. By acting, you strengthen your belief in your own capabilities, a concept psychologists refer to as self-belief or self-efficacy. This belief isn't something you wait for. It builds through practice, repetition, and proof that begins the moment you choose to move. So many of us delay because we convince ourselves that the moment isn't right, that we need more information, more time, or more certainty. But this mindset places your power in the hands of external conditions rather than within your own capacity to act. The truth is that the perfect moment rarely arrives. Life is dynamic, unpredictable, and full of noise. If you wait until everything is aligned just right, you may wait forever. What separates people who make progress from those who stay in the same place isn't perfection, it's willingness to begin imperfectly. People who act build momentum. They generate feedback. They learn, adapt, and refine. They grow. And with every step, they become stronger, more confident, and more capable of handling challenges that once seemed insurmountable. This shift in perspective, from waiting to acting, liberates you from an internal trap. It reminds you that potential is not a future resource that needs to be unlocked only when conditions are favorable. Potential is something you activate with choices and actions made in the present moment. You don't need to feel perfect to take the first step. You don't need to have the entire plan figured out. You only need to choose to begin now. And what you do next, even if it's small, has the power to alter the trajectory of your life. It is in these moments, when you decide to act despite fear, doubt, or uncertainty, that your true capacity begins to unfold. Take this as an invitation, a gentle, empowering reminder that your transformation begins with your next choice. Recognizing your power doesn't require grand gestures or sweeping changes. It requires small, consistent steps and a willingness to move forward even when the destination is not yet clear. Your potential doesn't wait in the future. It arises from your decisions today, from your courage to begin right now. And that, more than anything else, is where real change begins. Chapter 4. Habits that shape your now. Every day, from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, our lives are subtly shaped by patterns we hardly notice. Most of what we do each day, from brushing our teeth to reaching for our phone, from how we respond to stress to whether we choose to read or scroll, is guided not by conscious decisions, but by habits deeply embedded in the brain. These seemingly small routines have an invisible yet profound influence on our lives, quietly determining whether we move closer to our goals or stay wherever we are. Habits are the invisible architecture of everyday behavior. They form when a behavior is repeated in a consistent context, a particular time of day, an emotional trigger, or a familiar place, until the brain learns to execute it with minimal thought. Over time, these neural pathways become stronger, making the behavior feel almost automatic. This is why habits can feel effortless once established, but why they also feel so sticky and difficult to change once they're deeply ingrained. The good news is that because habits are rooted in repetition and context, they can be intentionally shaped to serve you rather than hinder you. It begins with understanding that your daily routines are not insignificant. They are the building blocks of your future self. The small choices you make each morning, each afternoon, and each evening set the tone for your confidence, your focus, and the momentum you carry into tomorrow. Reinforcing confidence through daily habits starts with simple practices that anchor you to intention rather than reaction. Consider affirmations, short, purposeful sentences you repeat to yourself to shape your mindset and reinforce confidence. These are not empty words, but reminders of your intentions and your strength. Similarly, journaling your thoughts each day gives your mind space to reflect, to process, and to clarify what truly matters. Both practices create predictable moments of self-connection, moments when your internal world gets as much attention as your external obligations. Over time, these simple routines form neural patterns that support a resilient, calm, and centered sense of self. But habits do more than reinforce confidence. They rewire avoidance into action. So often, we avoid tasks that matter most, not because they are unimportant, but because they feel uncomfortable or uncertain. When we turn intention into repeated action, something shifts neurologically and psychologically. Our brains begin to anticipate the reward associated with the routine, not just external rewards, but internal ones. The steady feeling of having shown up for yourself, the calm that follows completion, the momentum that starts to build when you stick with a practice day after day. This process of repetition and reinforcement is the same mechanism that makes bad habits so persistent, but now it works for you rather than against you. Psychologists describe the way habits form as a habit loop, a cue that triggers the behavior, the routine itself, and the reward that follows. Over time, your brain begins to link these elements so strongly that the behavior practically runs on autopilot. What once required conscious effort becomes effortless through repetition. This is why small, consistent decisions matter so much. They aren't small in their effect. They are compounding forces that strengthen your neural pathways and redefine what feels normal or easy in your life. Daily routines also build momentum, a psychological concept that works much like physical momentum. When you consistently perform small, purposeful actions, reading a few pages each day, walking for just 10 minutes, writing a brief reflection before bed, your brain begins to recognize a pattern of progress. With each repetition, your muscle memory strengthens, your confidence grows, and the act of continuing becomes easier than stopping. These repeated decisions eventually outgrow the initial effort required, transforming into automatic behaviors that support your growth without demanding constant willpower. Choosing discipline over comfort is the heart of sustainable transformation. Comfort often tempts us with immediate relief and familiarity, but it rarely yields growth. Discipline, on the other hand, is the structured commitment to show up even when motivation fluctuates. Discipline isn't about harsh self-criticism or rigid perfection. It's about creating a consistent rhythm that aligns your days with your deepest intentions. When you choose discipline, even in small ways, by waking up a little earlier, writing your goals before you check your phone, or setting aside time for reflection, you're prioritizing your future self over the fleeting ease of avoidance. In the science of habit formation, context and cues matter. Habits become stronger and more automatic when they are anchored to consistent environments or daily markers, morning light, the start of a meal, or the end of a workday. By intentionally designing a routine that supports your goals, you reduce the mental friction that so often leads to hesitation or procrastination. Rather than debating whether to act, your brain begins to see the routine as the natural next step in your day. Over time, this fosters an identity that reflects action rather than avoidance. So, as you listen, remember this: your habits truly shape who you will become. They are not separate from your intentions, they are your intentions in motion. Each time you choose consistency over ease, discipline over comfort, and repeated action over hesitation, you are strengthening the structure of your inner world. What feels difficult today becomes effortless tomorrow, because your brain has adapted and grown with every repetition. And that is how daily routines become the scaffolding of profound, lasting change.
Chapter 5. Acting Without Delay. There is a subtle but powerful voice inside your mind, a voice that whispers things like, "Not yet," "later," "maybe tomorrow." This voice is familiar to almost everyone because it is part of how the human brain protects itself from discomfort and uncertainty. But though that voice may feel comforting in the short term, it often stands between you and the life you deeply want to build. The first step in acting without delay is to recognize those internal procrastination voices for what they are, habitual thoughts that keep you stuck in hesitation rather than moving forward. You might hear these voices say things like, "I need to feel ready first," "I don't have enough time," or "I'll start when I'm in the right mood." These thoughts do not come from logic or your deeper self. They come from fear, doubt, or the instinct to avoid discomfort. Psychologists describe this delay not as a moral failing, but as a natural psychological pattern, a kind of automatic avoidance that tricks you into thinking waiting will make things easier. But though that voice may feel comforting in the short term, it often stands between you and the life you deeply want to build. Now imagine a different kind of inner dialogue, one that says, "I can start now, even if I'm not perfect," or "I choose action over hesitation." Recognizing the old procrastination voices is not about judging yourself. It's about becoming aware of them so that you can shift your internal patterns. Awareness is the first step towards action. Once you notice the thoughts that prompt delay, you can consciously choose a different response, one that leads you towards progress rather than retreat. This is where decision points become powerful. A decision point is any moment when you hesitate before acting. It might be when you think about writing a page, making a call, or starting a project that matters to you. At that moment, your brain faces a choice: respond to fear or respond with action. One effective way to override that hesitation is to use a simple strategy like the 5-second rule, counting down from 5 and then acting immediately, rather than allowing overthinking to take over. This interrupts the brain's automatic avoidance pattern and engages your decision-making center, helping you move forward before relief-seeking thoughts can convince you to delay further. Acting without delay also means embracing the idea that beginning is more important than perfection. You don't need to feel fully prepared, fully confident, or fully ready to start. In fact, research on procrastination finds that people often overestimate how difficult tasks will be, which makes them feel bigger and scarier than they really are. But when you start something small right now, you not only make actual progress, but you also change how your brain interprets the task. The next time you approach it, it feels more familiar and easier to begin again. One practical approach is to focus on tiny tasks that signify commitment. For example, open a new document and type a title, make the first phone call on your to-do list, or write a single sentence of that idea you've been holding in your mind. These small beginnings might feel inconsequential at first, but they build momentum. The same momentum that psychologists and productivity coaches say helps you overcome inertia and build confidence. Another strategy is to break larger tasks into bite-sized pieces so that beginning feels manageable rather than overwhelming. Psychologists call this chunking, dividing a daunting project into smaller steps that are easy to start. When each step feels achievable, your mind is much less likely to resist beginning, and each small completion strengthens your confidence and builds forward motion. You can also notice that some tasks take very little time to complete, sometimes just a minute or two, and simply decide to do those immediately. This quick engagement not only removes clutter from your physical or mental space, but it creates a psychological pattern of action rather than delay. The more you practice acting right away, the more your mind learns that hesitation does not provide real relief. Action does. So the key idea here is simple but transformative. Choose small action now rather than delay for perfection later. Let go of the belief that waiting makes you wiser or safer. Waiting often only allows fear and doubt to grow stronger. Instead, start where you are with what you have and do so immediately. Because every action, no matter how small, energizes your purpose and propels you closer to your goals. In the chapters ahead, you will continue to learn how to harness this momentum, build routines that support your decisions, and nurture a mindset that loves beginnings more than excuses. But for now, take this moment, this breath, this thought, and let it be your cue to act without delay.
Chapter 6. Living the Change. Your day is now. As we reach this final chapter, take a moment to settle in and reflect on the journey you've just experienced. You've walked through understanding why you wait, recognizing your power right now, building habits, and taking action without delay. Each of these steps has not only prepared you for change, it is change. What you've learned and practiced isn't theory, it's the foundation of a life lived intentionally, with purpose, and with courage. What you do today defines your tomorrow, because your choices, even the small ones, accumulate, reshape your mindset, and create meaningful momentum in your life. Small steps taken consistently are not insignificant. They are the engine of transformation. Progress matters more than perfection. Too often we fall into the trap of thinking that everything has to be just right before we celebrate, before we begin again, or before we trust ourselves. But progress isn't measured in flawless execution. It's measured in movement forward, in the courage to show up and do what you said you would do, even when conditions aren't perfect. Each time you choose to act, even imperfectly, you strengthen your belief in yourself, and that belief becomes a powerful force that shapes how you show up in life. It's through repeated, imperfect action that confidence grows, and your identity begins to align with the person you want to become. Look back now.
not with criticism or regret, but with honest appreciation for how far you've come. Think of the moments when you paused, hesitated, and still chose action. Those moments aren't small. They are the proof of your resilience, your growth, and your commitment to your own development. When you acknowledge these victories, even the quiet ones you barely noticed at the time, you reinforce positive patterns in your brain, strengthening motivation and resilience for future challenges. Celebrating progress, no matter how modest, trains your mind to value movement and continuity over stagnation and perfection. Life is not designed to be perfectly predictable or entirely comfortable. It is dynamic, full of challenges and surprises, but it is also full of opportunity, if you choose to see it that way. Change isn't a single moment, it's a series of moments, many of which are unremarkable until you look back and see how they shaped your path. Choosing now, again and again, is how you build not just habits, but a life that reflects your values and your purpose. Each decision to act today is a vote for the person you are becoming, a person who does not live in fear of delay, but in appreciation of presence and possibility. So let this be your affirmation to carry forward. I choose action today. I honor progress over perfection. I grow through what I do, not merely what I imagine. Let these words stay with you as a reminder that your power is in the now, not somewhere down the road, not when conditions are just right, but in the choices you make this very moment. You do not need every answer or a complete plan. You need courage, presence, and consistency. Your actions, small, imperfect, genuine, create your future. Remember that what you've built in this audiobook, the understanding, the practices, the shifts in mindset, these are the tools you take with you beyond this audio. They are not confined to this moment. They are living forces within you. With every intentional choice you make going forward, you continue to shape a life of meaning, connection, and strength. Let this chapter echo in your thoughts when hesitation emerges, when doubt creeps in, or when you simply need a reminder of how far you've come. Your day is now, and it is yours to live with purpose. You are not waiting for change. You are becoming change.